So far, we've spoken to Juliette Kayyem, Don Berwick, Joe Avalone. Today, we are joined by the latest person to join the Democratic field. That would be Attorney General Martha Coakley. Attorney General, it's great to see you.
So good afternoon. It's great to see you both.
Well, thank you for being here, Attorney General Coakley. Now, here, as you know, Jim asks everyone incessantly, so you're going to run for governor, you're going to run for the United States Senate, you're going to run for governor. He's asked you probably a million times if you were going to run
now he has
for
his
governor.
answer.
Well, you weren't going to run for governor because you talked about how much you love the job, so Attorney General's job. So obviously something changed. What happened?
Well, I do love the Attorney General's job, and I love the stuff we've been able to do. But we do have an empty corner office come 2014. And as I've thought about the reasons I've always done the work I do in public service, keeping kids safe, helping move our economy along, all of those things made me decide that it was important that we have a good governor. I think everybody would like that. And I wanted to get into the race to talk about keeping the economy moving for everybody, not just for people at the top, and to make sure that we are able to modernize our schools, that our kids get the best education, but more importantly, we work with them and our businesses to make sure that everybody who wants a job is going to get the kind of training, workforce training, to do that. There's a lot of work to do. And I'm prepared to roll up my sleeves and start talking to folks about whether I would be the best candidate and best governor for Massachusetts.
Martha Coakley, have you done one interview since you announced where someone has not said how horrible your campaign was against Scott Brown? Have you done one?
Probably not.
Well, let me tell you what
so
my view is.
will this be one?
No, it won't, because let me tell you, I think I may surprise you here. The conventional wisdom is Charlie Baker, who's the likely Republican nominee, horrible against Deval Patrick. You horrible. If I hear the Fenway thing one more time, I'm going to scream. Do you honestly believe? It seems to me Scott Brown was a really good candidate you ran against. Deval Patrick was a really good candidate that Charlie Baker ran against. I've read you say, I know I made mistakes. It's in your video. I'm going to do things differently. Do you really think you ran a rotten campaign, or was that just the conventional wisdom which you have to buy into to put that behind you?
Well, I think there are a lot of factors, but the first one for me was to acknowledge we made mistakes. I made mistakes. And look, I've learned from them, Jim. I got right back to work, and I've run again. I've run statewide since then successfully. And I do think that people who run and who lose, you learn more sometimes.
What'd you learn? What are the, other than the Fenway thing, which has become part of the literature of the time?
And I was outside Fenway,
We
Since
saw
then,
you
we saw
outside
you.
Fenway
Absolutely.
shaking hands. Yes,
So
we did.
what are the mistakes? What are the things you learned from when you ran against Brown for the Senate that you were either correcting or doing differently this round?
Well,
Martha Coakley?
I learned in a special election, for instance, that time is compressed. You have to focus on doing a lot of things at the same time, and maybe you don't do them all as well as you should. Keeping touch with people, doing the meeting with the activists and working the retail piece of it, being out talking to folks, and I look forward to this race because this is an opportunity with a longer race. And I've already gotten a great start talking to people who are active in the Democratic Party and talking in the out on the street as I did for 3 days all over Massachusetts. And people are interested in this. They want a good governor. They got a lot of good ideas about where we should go. And I'm learning a lot being on the road.
You said in your announcement, I know what it's like to lose a race. I know how hard it is. And then you said, but it's nothing compared to what so many people go through every day in their lives. But I remember thinking, and I've known you for a while, if somebody was on Saturday Night Live saying I was the worst columnist in the history of the United States of the world, I'd be under a rock
Did
somewhere.
you miss that show, Marjorie, when they did that?
I probably did. No one told me. They said, no, I'd be poised in the corner of the Tobin Bridge. But how did you manage that? Because that is hard. It wasn't just in Massachusetts. It was the whole country, really. Did you go to a spa for a couple of days, or did you just take the dogs for a walk? I know you lost one of your dogs.
Well, I did take the dogs for a walk.
Yeah, how did you deal with that? How did you come back?
Well, what I actually did was get back to work, frankly. And I have jokingly said, look, how else was I going to get on Saturday Night Live, right? I think it's a great badge of honor. And I got back to work to do the kinds of things that I run for office for. In the great work we've done in the area, keeping people in their homes, fighting the big banks, making sure that we pass a human trafficking bill, making sure, and this is what drives me to do the work we get to do. And so I learned that in that race, that people want to see that, they want to hear it, and I think they want to see and hear that in a governor, and I'm prepared to do that. I know I'm going to make up some ground, and but I'm moving ahead, and I'm going to roll up my sleeves and meet everybody who's interested in where Massachusetts is going. going.
One last thing about the last race.
I'm not done with the last race.
You're not?
Go
Okay,
ahead.
for me, anyway. It's one of the things I've always told people when we've talked about this last race is that they forget that you won the primary by, I believe, 20 points.
19.
Okay, 19. So 19 points is a big win. Michael Capuano, a very capable candidate, you beat him. So you came out of this very strong. And I think there was such a shock that a Republican even had a chance for what we used to call Ted Kennedy's seat before Scott Brown said it's the people's seat. That was one of his best lines in that campaign. That had to be part of it, that the expectation that a Republican state senator had no chance.
Sure. And I think that a lot of elections and people's perceptions are about expectations. And that's why, I'm starting this with none. I have no expectations except that I'm going to work really hard, because I do think that people do pay attention to why you're running, what you care about, what you do. And I'm really proud of my record, the things we've done in the AG's office, keeping healthcare costs down, making sure that people, you'd spend a lot of time talking about the Affordable Care Act, making sure that people can afford their health care here and making sure that we keep those options. We've done a lot of work on that. I can continue to do that as governor. By the way, that's one of the reasons that we will help businesses stay here, because we can keep healthcare costs down, we'll keep energy costs down, we'll create the kind of climate that businesses will stay here, grow here, and we'll create the kind of education system that'll give them the workers. That's what people in Massachusetts want. That's why I do the work I've done in public service. That's why I ran again for AG, and that's why I'm running for governor.
So far this interview, for the 7 minutes we've been together, we asked petty questions about campaigning, and you
and I've been
segue
smiling
into
the whole
policy
way
issues.
through it.
Here's the last one, and then we are going to get to some policy stuff. I mentioned the Fenway thing before, which I think was horribly overdone. But in any case, not by you, but by us in the media playing it forever. However, Scott Lehigh from the Globe wrote a piece about your kickoff where you're going to get, down with the people, that sort of thing, a new era. And he writes this piece where you're supposed to go, is it called Dempsey's, the little lunch place in your hometown of Medford?
Coffee breakfast spot in
whatever
Medford.
it is. And he says, and what happens? Martha Coakley goes to the door of some pizza joint by mistake. And he doesn't say this, but thus proving she really doesn't go to those places. What's the truth of that little episode
Well,
there?
two things. Dempsey's is on the other side of town, I have to tell you. It's, East Medford.
And you're on the other side.
And I'm on the other side. And the truth is that as we were walking in, we had a gaggle. We had a lot of people, a lot of cars. I saw some folks that I was meeting there who were over that way. So I walked over. I thought they were beckoning me, so I went over to see them. But it was no more or less than that. And so we walked into Dempsey's. And by the way, I had a great reception in Dempsey's.
How's the food there?
Food, didn't have any. That morning, I had coffee, and my husband had a muffin, and it was made on the premises, and he swears by it.
Speaking of your husband, in terms of change, at least my analysis as an outsider here, I've met your husband a lot of times, usually when he accompanies you to a studio. Former cop, but very low profile in your former campaigns. He was out there that first day. Is that a change that you and your family have consciously decided to make, that your husband is going to be an active part of this campaign, Martha Coakley?
Absolutely. And we talked a lot this summer about what the race would mean and everything that we would have to do together. And I said, look, I'd like to do this, but I'm not doing it unless you want to do it and you think we should do it. And he has been gung-ho. He's been out with me. He's enjoying it. He sends off to the family, his little observations about what's happening on the campaign trail. And he's in this race and he's enjoying it.
Okay, you mentioned the economy. It's one of the first things you said today. Not just for the people at the top, and I'm paraphrasing, but for everybody else as well. Make it work for them. Give us a couple of concrete things that you do as governor to make it work for the middle class and for the working poor.
Sure. Well, Wall Street is doing very well, and we're in a good position to see that. We're still fielding phone calls every day from people who are about to be foreclosed upon. And let me give you one quick other example, Jim. I don't know if you guys have talked about it or seen it, but we've got a real crisis coming with flood mortgage insurance right on the horizon because FEMA is redoing the maps across the country.
Federal Emergency Management, yeah.
Yes, including in Massachusetts. And they are taking away the subsidy that they now get so that people's flood insurance is affordable. And I spent Saturday morning down in Scituate with about 220 people, many of whom are going to have their homes foreclosed upon because they will not be able to go from $800 a year to $20,000 a year.
$20,000?
The numbers on this, Marjorie, are astounding. And I know our congressional folks are working on it with FEMA. We're working on it at the state level and with the local folks. But that's the kind of thing when the federal government or a big corporation does something because maybe because they're too big to care, I don't know, but they do stuff that affects people every single day. We're the ones who step in and try and make that work. And just when people are coming around, I think, holding on to their homes, maybe building a little equity, we get another thing like this. And so we need to make sure that when Congress acts or agencies act or the state acts or the economy turns around on Wall Street, that people in the middle class who want to build equity, want to send their kids to college, are going to be able to continue to do it. And never forgetting the poorest folks, the people who are at the bottom that sometimes, you think this battle is about the haves and the have-mores. No one pays attention sometimes to the homeless, to people, to our veterans. I mean, I think it's a disgrace we have veterans in Massachusetts who are homeless, who suffer from mental illness, who don't get attention. All of those things.
What can the state do about that? I mean, that's a huge part of the responsibility there of the feds. And if they're not meeting their responsibility, what can the state do in tough fiscal times, Martha Coakley?
Well, I think that we have to make those decisions about what is a society we care about, we will invest in. Education is obviously one of them. Caring for people and health care is obviously one. We have to make it work, and we'll find ways to do it.
We're talking with Martha Coakley. She is Attorney General of the Commonwealth. She is also running on the Democratic ticket for Governor of the Commonwealth. You just mentioned education, and I don't think I've ever asked you about education, which I am obsessed with because I think that things are not going well in the public schools, particularly in urban areas. So where are you in some of these so-called hot-button issues like charter schools or merit pay for teachers or moving away from some of the union rules to be able to experiment more in the public schools?
Well, let me say, first of all, I'm a big believer in having an extended school day. I think we've seen that work. We are about to do that. I think most people agree we have to find a way to keep kids in school for longer periods of time for learning, but look at the other benefits you get. You get the afternoon time when kids get into trouble or unwanted pregnancies, or you free up parents who are always worrying about daycare.
Right.
And I also think we need to think about changing the system so that we don't have kids out in time to do the planting and then come back after the harvest. I mean, we have a school system built on an agrarian schedule, and we could do better, particularly with kids who may struggle in math or English. They may be up to speed in June, and then they're off for 2.5+ months. It's harder for them to catch up. So we need to modernize what we do in terms of teaching, the way we live, what we know. And I think that some of the charter schools have been great. We need that kind of innovation. They also need to be accountable because some of them haven't done so well with their finances. So we need to be, I think, with the teachers' unions. I think people go into teaching because they want to teach. That's great. And people join unions because they want the economic security of it. I don't have a problem with that. And I think that we will figure out with all of our unions in Massachusetts. They all live in the communities. Most of them live where they work. They live in the state. We'll figure out how to make this happen.
So merit pay wouldn't be something that you would find attractive?
Well, no, I'm not against the concept of it, but let's talk about it for a minute. It depends on what you mean by that, because, if you have kids who aren't good students, why should you be disadvantaged if you teach at a school where maybe you're in a tonier zip code and the kids have better help at home? They're going to be better students. So that's an easier job. Maybe we should merit pay for the teachers who teach in the tougher schools where the kids are farther behind, who need more work. So let's talk about how we provide the right incentives for teachers to join the profession. I'd love to see young men and women coming out of college thinking about teaching, something that's so important that we say is important. We usually give lip service to it.
Can we change to a totally different topic? The civil liberties unions of Massachusetts and Florida approached not the attorney general in Florida, but some county attorney and you, and said Ibrahim Todashev was killed by the FBI in his apartment in Orlando. And for those that don't remember Todashev, he's the one who allegedly was about to sign a confession saying that he and the older Tsarnaev brother were responsible for the unsolved triple murder in Waltham on 9/11 of 11,
yes.
That kind of thing.
Yes.
He was shot dead. And as you know, there's been very little out of the FBI. Stories have changed. What he had or didn't have, what he leaped at the FBI agent with or didn't leap. They requested that you, since you had taxpayer-funded troopers there, Massachusetts taxpayer-funded troopers in the apartment at some time during this discussion with Ibrahim Todashev, that you conduct an investigation, by the way, that came after a New York Times story that showed in 150 incidents where the FBI had investigated itself in shootings or other harm done to suspects, they cleared themselves 150 out of 150 times. But you, Martha Coakley, said, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, you refused to do it. Why did you refuse to do it?
Well, I didn't refuse to do it. I simply don't have the authority or jurisdiction. Let me just say this, Jim. If that had happened when I was DA, and DAs do the investigations around homicide, if we had that happen in Middlesex County when I was DA, I would have done that investigation. So I was glad to hear that the Florida district attorney, who does have jurisdiction and the ability to review that, said he is undertaking that investigation. I know there's great concern about that. The FBI has said they're doing a review. I assume that's got to be made available, will be made available to the DA who's also doing that investigation. And you know, if people are not satisfied with the results of that, then we'll see what other options we have.
What other options? I mean, my recollection, I could be wrong, that there was a matter out of Detroit where the authorities comparable to you were unhappy with the FBI's investigation of a shooting there. I could be wrong. You're looking at me like I could be. And
I'm just not familiar with it.
So your view is that you don't have the power to do what you were requested to do. Is that why you didn't do it?
Basically, yes, because an action takes place on property somewhere, and you know the district attorney in Boston doesn't have authority in Middlesex. I don't have authority in the state of Florida to review what's potentially a criminal act.
But how about even questioning your own state troopers about what happened there, even if you don't investigate? Just debriefing them about what they saw. Were they there at the time of the shooting? Was he about to sign a confession?
You shouldn't assume that has not been done, not necessarily by me, but by other authorities in Massachusetts.
But I guess that's the thing that I think is so hard for me and a lot of other people to understand. We had 2 Massachusetts state troopers down there when this young man was shot. We don't even know how many times he was shot. We still haven't gotten any information about that. So I guess I don't understand why we haven't had some statement made public either through your office or through the state police to say at least that we have questioned these troopers and to explain why were they there and why were they there. We don't even know why they were there.
No, we know why they were there.
Why were they there?
My understanding, and I don't have any insider information, but Jim just said, they were down investigating what happened in that triple murder in Waltham and thought that there may be some connection with what happened that day, with what happened with the marathon bombings. So this is a U.S. attorney's investigation. It's a federal investigation out of Boston. It is a Middlesex district attorney's investigation on the homicide. So I find it a little bit unusual that everybody's saying, why isn't the attorney general doing something?
Do you mean that Carmen Ortiz, the U.S. attorney here, you think would have jurisdiction to investigate this?
I can't answer that.
Or are you talking about the district attorney that oversees Waltham?
No, I'm just saying that of all the people who might be able to do those reviews, and my guess is they would have an interest in it. It's an investigation of a federal case with a connection to a state case, neither of which I am involved in as an investigator. But the FBI will have to make its report available. The DA down there, who does have jurisdiction, said he is doing a review of it. So you will hear the results of this.
Well, let me ask you one more thing, Martha Coakley. You were the district attorney of Middlesex County. Were this a case in your jurisdiction as a district attorney, would you think it would be an appropriate place for you to be letting the public know what the heck was going on?
Not before the investigation is completed, and that's where I know everybody's anxious, but it is standard, whether it's Massachusetts, federal, or FBI. When there is a police-involved shooting, that investigation is done. The results are not made public in real time as it's going on. It will be made public when it's finished. And I hope and trust that will happen.
Martha, we're talking to Martha Coakley, Attorney General and Democratic candidate for the nomination to succeed Deval Patrick. One last thing about marathon-related thing. We've had this discussion with Deval Patrick and a whole host of other people. Based upon the initial testimony that Ed Davis gave in front of Congress, based upon what Congressman Keating said when he came back from his trip to Russia, suggesting that there were warning signs that our law enforcement, not ours, Massachusetts, federal, missed or screwed up. Do you accept the notion that it is possible that had everybody done their job properly prior to April 15th, that the marathon bombings could have been prevented?
I think that's totally speculative, Jim. I agree that you always need to look back and say, what did we miss? What did we have? But I don't know the extent of the information or the files or the dot connecting they make. And so that's a fair question, perhaps, but I can't really answer that one.
Martha
I think
Coakley,
we need to look at it.
A conversation we've had, the two of us have had with you, I've had with you individually. There is virtually no state in America that has a worst record of electing women to executive positions. The only woman who's ever, I think, is Shannon O'Brien and you are the only two people women have ever been elected to constitutional office in their own right.
No, Lieutenant Evelyn Murphy.
Well, I mean, so was Jane Swift,
governor.
but she was part of the package with.
No, but she was elected as a lieutenant governor. I mean,
on her own
with
no, they're elected. They're elected as part of the the part of the governor they're running with. What in any case, why do you think you can break this schneid? I mean, we are allegedly
This what?
Schneid.
What's that mean?
Schneid means like you strike out kind of thing. I'm
okay,
sorry.
I never heard
It's
that
a
word.
guy
Maybe it's
term.
Yiddish.
Okay.
You know, I think about it.
It's
Whatever
Yiddish,
it is.
okay.
But there is a horrible. By the way, Emily's List. Did you see the listing and posting on Emily's List? The typo they
Yeah, it
had.
was terrible.
Yes.
They made a
You saw,
mistake.
we should say it's obviously a typo they made. They said they endorsed Emily's List. This is obviously important. Women's organization endorsed Martha Coakley and meant to say the first elected governor of Massachusetts, and they said the worst elected governor.
Worst
that was
woman.
really obviously one person.
Well, I
doesn't-
could be the best and the worst,
That's a
right?
very good
Because that'll be
point.
the
You're
only,
the only
one.
one.
And
But
look, these gremlins happen. This
but
is
it
why
all-
you develop a sense of humor.
But do you
right.
not worry about? We seemingly are not. I don't get it. We seemingly are not crazy about having women in executive
Look,
positions.
Elizabeth Warren has gone to Senate. We have a congressional race where we have 2 women candidates in it.
Fifth CD.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance that a woman will be joining Nikki Tsongas in Washington.
Why do you think, though, that the history has been, and maybe it is turning with Elizabeth Warren, maybe it's a different era, but why do we have this horrible history? And it is a horrible history.
You know, my sense is that politics is very competitive here, as you know. When a seat opens up, there's a lot of people fighting for that seat. And so, look, we have 12 good people in a mayor's race. And, only 2 can make the primary, only 1 can be mayor. All of those people in that race, virtually all of them, have a great political future. They'll run again. They're going to stay engaged. So, look, like anything else, you try stuff, you win, you lose, you keep. All successful people have failed. I've learned that. The one thing they share in common is that they get back to work and they keep trying.
There have been a lot of stories this year. The Herald has done a lot of them about fraud in the welfare system and EBT card abuse. We were just this morning looking at how you get onto the exchanges for Obamacare, and I didn't understand how you could figure this out unless you had like some kind of PhD or something.
A degree from Stanford, perhaps.
Exactly, that's right. And then I
Which
read
Marjorie
about
does if you don't appreciate the
I
reference.
do.
Yes, I know
I
you
do.
do. I didn't know if the listeners did.
But then I read about this Medford couple, and they have been apprehended, if that's the correct word. But the couple with the $80,000, the husband I think had the $80,000 a year job, and yet for 6 years they were getting health insurance and food stamps and mass health and disability to the tune of $161,000. And I know they have been found out, but they were able to pull this off for 6 years. I find this just incredible. How can people have confidence in our system? Were you to become the governor here, when you read about a couple like this, it's
I thought you were
amazing.
going to say you'd like to know how they did it. 'Cause
I
then
would
you,
like
then
to
you
know.
could figure out how you get
Well,
those
it is
benefits.
pretty amazing. They must have had a PhD from Stanford or something.
Well, look, we start from the premise that we believe people should get these kinds of benefits, right? So then you start from the premise that there's always going to be people trying to game the system, and you develop systems both at the beginning that will try and eliminate that as much as possible, which, by the way, we are doing with our new inspector general, with our auditor, with the agencies involved, whether it's EBT cards or these kind of things. How do we tighten that up? And the legislature just asked us to formalize that, and we've worked, as we did in our office, after the big dig, we had teams that made sure the stimulus money coming into Massachusetts did not go awry. And I'm really proud of the fact that we focused on those dollars and where they were supposed to go. The other piece that we've been really active on is when we get complaints like this, we investigate them. We hold people accountable. We bring civil suits. We bring, criminal suits. Someone just went to jail for 2.5 years for running a convenience store where they're getting kickbacks on EBT cards. We're going to continue to do that. Watch where the dollars are going. They should be going where they're supposed to go, and hold people accountable when they break the law.
2 last quick things from me. What do you think of Charlie Baker? Silence.
Charlie Baker is been in Massachusetts for a long time. He's got a great family. His wife is terrific. He's done some great things in his life, and I look forward to winning a primary. I look forward to a primary first. That's what I'm focused on, and I'll look forward, if I'm successful, to talking to Charlie about who should be the next governor.
Now, last thing from me is you, I believe, filed the first lawsuit that successfully challenged the Defense of Marriage Act. And
First and only.
and it wasn't
For
the one
states.
It didn't go to the Supreme Court, but I know you were sitting there for the Supreme Court. I know you hang out with attorneys general, and I assume if you're governor, you'd hang out with governors. What's the for the 30-some states that have constitutional bans? It's not the law, it's not an executive order, constitutional bans on same-sex marriage. Is there any route out of that realistically, other than hoping that the Supreme Court ultimately goes the whole 9 yards? What's the strategy amongst people like you to essentially break that logjam in 2/3 of the states.
Well, and other folks are working on this state by state as well at the federal level. The thing that's been the most successful, actually, is when real people actually see, as we did in Massachusetts, that we have daughters, sons, uncles, mothers, co-workers who are gay, who are lesbian, and you know what? We love them, we work with them, and we recognize that fundamental right of marriage. It's so important. It's a very conservative value, frankly, to make that commitment to spend time with someone, to raise a family if you choose. That is going to, I think, much sooner than people think, with a new generation coming along, take hold in states. It may take ultimately some Supreme Court action, but the best news is that in this movement, this has been from the bottom up, because people know that it's wrong to deny people they know, love, work with the right to marry.
Okay, before you go, tell people what's the first thing you complained about when you walked into the studio before we went on air. Just tell the truth.
What'd
Go
she
ahead,
complain
Martha.
about?
She
I
complained.
remember.
First words out of her mouth.
I said,
She
where's
was
the Bruce Springsteen?
Right in our old incarnation. Hey, Martha
danced
Coakley,
to a
good
few
luck. We hope to
songs.
see a lot over the next
I
campaign.
look forward to coming back. Thank you,
I
guys.
did
Thank
see
you.
Martha Coakley do a lip sync to Aretha Franklin's Respect.
How was that?
It was pretty impressive, I
It
must
was?
say. Yeah,
She
absolutely.
has a smile on her face right now.
Okay. Attorney General
Thank you,
Martha
Martha.
Coakley is running for governor on the Democratic ticket. Tune in next week to hear from another person who's in the race, State Treasurer Steve Grossman.